The UN Food Agriculture Organization presented new equipment to the NEA for its chemical laboratory after a complete renovation of the facility. Tunisia continues to battle against irregular migration challenges amid influx of migrants. And Chinese president visits Putin in Russia as the two countries boost relations. Well, this and more coming your way on The World Today. Hello, this is Eyeafrica TV and you are watching the World Today News Bulletin coming to you live from our studios in Banjul. Many thanks for joining us. I am Amadou Kante and now the news in details. Now, the National Environment Agency on Monday officially received instrument from FAO for its chemical analysis laboratory after the complete renovation of the facility funded by the Food and Agriculture Organization under the project dubbed Adapting Agriculture to Climate Change in the Gambia. Now, the chemical analysis laboratory is a critical resource for the NEA in providing essential technical data and analysis services. Yahya Jammeh tells us more of that in this report.
Provision of the state-of-the-art equipment will revive the laboratory services which have been in existence since the inception of the agency and been the center of analysis for the sub-region. However, the lab has been dysfunctional for a long period due to its dilapidated condition, thus prompting FAO's intervention to resuscitate the facility. The NEA Executive Director, Dr. Adawada Baji, said the negotiations for the project started way back in 2015 when they were invited by the FAO to participate in the project preparatory grant inception workshop. Mr. Baji said the state-of-the-art laboratory will enhance the formulation and the monitoring of nutrition and the chemicals through analysis.
Strengthening the quality control laboratory through the support of FAO project adapting agriculture to climate change with the state-of-the-art equipment will enhance its capacity to carry out pesticide formulation as well as monitor nutrition and chemical profiles of diverse crops and varieties through residual analysis, which is pivotal to making informed decisions on the use of agrochemicals. In addition, it also envisages that if the necessary apparatus are obtained and functional, the lab shall be able to analyze other related nutrient-based chemicals such as fertilizer, expired fertilizer, and other chemical-related products in the country to enable the NEA give proper advice on safe disposal due to adequate knowledge on the composition.
Mosibudi Rampedi, the country director for the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, explains the necessity leading to the rehabilitation and the upgrading of NEA's chemical laboratory analysis, which according to her worth over $80 million.
We see the laboratory as a national asset. We hope that the capacity that has been put into the laboratory, the equipment will be of value and improve the status of analyzing what is required for a better environment and better production for the sector. Honorable Minister, colleagues and ladies and gentlemen, you may take note that we did not only just rehabilitate the laboratory, we took the opportunity to also train 8 national staff. They were trained on the operation and the maintenance of this equipment and the laboratory.
Gambia lacks proper laboratory facilities to examine certain issues, be it in health, agriculture, environment, among others, and instead, it depends on neighboring countries to get the results of such issues. In solidifying the latter, the country's Minister of Environment, Climate Change and Natural Resources said relying on other countries for such critical requirement is not convenient for the country.
It is good to have good things, but for the future to enjoy it, it has to be sustainable. And I want to emphasize to the NEA executive director and the team to make sure that this has been put in the forefront of the M&E. The lab needs to be sustainable, and it needs to be sustainable in all angles, by the technicians using it, by the resources to operate it, for the future continuity use of this lab. Government of the Gambia is very concerned about the environment. That is why all issues of the environment is readily being put into all the sectors that are there towards playing the key role.
The laboratory is upgraded with new instruments worth $84 million, and the newly installed equipment includes gas chromatograph, mass spectrometry, and an automated sampling system. It also has minor analytical laboratory equipment, accessories, and other items. Reporting for Eyeafrica News, I am Yahya Jammeh.
Now, moving on, Tunisia continues to grapple with growing irregular migration issues as the country becomes the destination for most of the migrants trying to reach Europe. Now, despite the government's initiated measures to regulate the situation, more migrants continue to target the North African region as a transit point through the Mediterranean, while others remained in the North African countries if they failed to make the journey, especially for those in the sub-Saharan region. Now, Tunisia's president recently made a derogatory comment towards the black migrants in his country, which was widely condemned around the world. Let's have more details of that in this report.
Tunisian social scientists who have studied the phenomenon of regular and irregular migration flows in the Mediterranean basin in North Africa explained that the beginning of irregular migration to Europe started 30 years ago.
In order to understand the start of the migration flow from the sub-Saharan countries to the Arab Maghreb region, we need to go back to the 1990s. That's when Italy and Spain imposed the visa restrictions. This decision triggered the irregular migration phenomenon, which is known in the North African region as Harga, for the people who wanted to reach Europe.
The reasons for the surge in irregular migration have been influenced by an interplay of economic, social and security factors. Following dozens of shipwrecks and tragedies in the Mediterranean in recent years, as well as Italy's interception of migrant boats and return policy, tens of thousands of undocumented migrants chose to stay and live in North Africa.
The functions of Northern African countries has changed over time. Tunisia, Algeria, Libya and Morocco became host countries, departure areas, but also transit zones in the Mediterranean. Migrants from sub-Saharan Africa who fail to make the journey to Europe usually stay temporarily in the region. They choose Tunisia to live and work because it's the safest compared to Algeria and Libya and the closest to the coasts of Europe.
Abdelhamid Largish is a professor emeritus of history at the University of Manouba in Tunis. The expert in migration says sub-Saharan migrants have always assimilated to the culture of the region and do not intend to edge out the indigenous North African population.
Claiming that migrants want to edge out this region's native populations is a chimera. It's just an illusion. Since prehistory, people from sub-Saharan Africa have always moved to the north. This was later called migration. This is proven scientifically because the genes of migrants from the south of this continent are an integral part of the genes of North Africans.
The Italian parliament voted last month in favor of a controversial project imposing restrictions on charity and civilian rescue operators in the Mediterranean. Migration experts say Italy's policy will push more undocumented migrants to settle temporarily or permanently in North Africa.
And that migration-related report there is coming from the North African country of Tunisia. Now, elsewhere in the continent, amid the prevailing economic challenges coupled with the increasing electricity crisis in South Africa, the country's economic freedom fighters held a nationwide protest which brought the country's capital city, Pretoria, to a standstill. Among other things, the protesters are also demanding that the President Cyril Ramaphosa to resign and to end the persistent energy crisis in the remote nation, where similar anti-government demonstrations were also held in several African countries, including Senegal. Here's more details of that in this report.
South Africa's capital, Pretoria, came to a standstill as the economic freedom fighters led a nationwide shutdown. On the eve of Human Rights Day, the opposition party is demanding an end to load shedding and for Cyril Ramaphosa's resignation as president.
As far for service delivery, the services within our country is very bad. We don't have roads, the security, in terms of the crime is very high.
Sporadic incidents of violence broke out and dozens of arrests were made overnight, but protests mostly remained peaceful amid a strong show of police and army presence. The EFF has vowed to continue to fight if President Ramaphosa defies the call to end his term.
We'll continue to intensify our protests. We'll continue to hold him accountable in Parliament and use legislative means and the courts as well. It's going to be continued rolling protests.
Similar protests erupted in Nigeria, Tunisia, Senegal and Kenya over high levels of corruption, unemployment, poverty and growing inequality. There's a growing discontent not just in South Africa but in other nations too. African people want jobs and better lives for themselves and for generations to come.
You're watching the World Today News Bulletin on Eyeafrica TV, coming to you live from our studios in Banjul. And from that report there in South Africa, we now take a break and come back shortly. Welcome back, and this is Africa TV. You are watching the World Today News Bulletin. Once again, many thanks for joining us. Let's now look at the rest of the stories. Now, a UN spokesperson updated reporters on an attack in the South Sudan's Johej state and a string of attacks in North Kivu and Ituri in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and the launch of the stabilization strategy for the central region in Mali. Now, the United Nations condemned the attack in South Sudan, which resulted in the killings of 2 aid workers and as well as injured many civilians. Yahya Jammeh has the details in this report.
On February 10th, a nurse with MSF and at least 20 other civilians were killed and several others injured in Agok town when fighting broke out between communities from Twik, and the Abbey administrative area. On the same day, an aid worker in Mirmir, Unity State, was killed in crossfire during clashes between factions of Sudan People's Liberation Army in opposition and militias affiliated with the government forces. 2 days later, a humanitarian agency vehicle traveling to a health facility came under fire and 3 health workers were seriously injured. On South Sudan, UN Deputy Spokesperson Farhan Haq told reporters on Monday that the humanitarian coordinator at interim there, Meshak Malo, has condemned an attack in Jonglei State in which 2 aid workers were killed on 17th March. He adds that these frequent attacks have temporarily paused its convoy movement in the region.
This is the latest in a series of incidents targeting humanitarian convoys and workers in the country. Following the latest attack, the World Food Programme temporarily paused its convoy movements out of Bor in Jonglei. This corridor is critical to pre-position food ahead of the rainy season when roads are inaccessible. More than 1 million people in Jonglei and Pibor rely on the food aid transported along this route. Mr. Malo called on authorities to urgently improve security and to protect civilians and humanitarian workers and supplies.
Turning to the Democratic Republic of Congo, Haq said that the peacekeeping mission in the country reported that armed groups perpetrated a string of attacks in North Kivu and Ituri overnight on Saturday, triggering population displacement.
In the village of Anguli in North Kivu, suspected ADF members killed at least 10 civilians and abducted 3 others. The same day, in response to the attacks, MONUSCO and the Congolese Defense Forces launched joint patrols along the Beni-Butembo Road and engaged with local authorities and community members in areas where the ADF is present. Since the 6th of March, attacks by the ADF resulted in at least 118 civilian casualties. In Ituri, at least 11 civilians died, including 2 women and 2 children, in simultaneous raids by the armed group Codeco across several villages in Mahagi territory. UN peacekeepers dispatched a patrol towards the village of Ngote to protect the populations fleeing the violence and to support efforts by the National Army to restore stability there.
At least 130 humanitarian workers, mostly South Sudanese, have been killed on duty since the war broke out in 2013. Attacks against unarmed people and aid workers are utterly reprehensible, violate international law, and may constitute war crimes. They impede humanitarian work and threaten the lives of thousands of South Sudanese who rely on humanitarian assistance. It is estimated that at least 8.9 million people need humanitarian support this year. Since independence in 2011, South Sudan has been plagued by crises, including a 5-year civil war between President Salva Kiir's loyalists and Vice President Riek Machar's forces, with an estimated 400,000 deaths. Reporting for Eyeafrica News, I am Yahya Jammeh.
And from the report by Yahya Jammeh, now Chinese President Xi Jinping is in Russia, where he held talks with his Russian counterpart on bilateral relations between the two countries and the issues of mutual interest. During their meeting, the leaders reiterated commitment to further foster relations in various fields and enhance strategic cooperation on multilateral cooperations. Now, the ongoing Russia and Ukraine conflict was also discussed during their talks. Let's have more details of that in this report.
During their meeting at the Kremlin, Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin had an in-depth and candid exchange on bilateral relations and issues of mutual interest. The two presidents held close exchanges over the past decade. They said both countries are committed to realizing national development and rejuvenation, support world multipolarity, and work for greater democracy in international relations. President Xi spoke highly of China-Russia relations, saying the two nations are each other's biggest neighbor and comprehensive strategic partner of coordination. Xi told Putin that China is firm in strengthening strategic coordination with Russia. The Chinese president also said the two countries should further deepen practical cooperation in various fields, as well as strengthen coordination and collaboration on multilateral platforms. President Putin extended a warm welcome to Xi. The Russian president acknowledged the fruitful results of bilateral relations in recent years and voiced to continue to deepen practical cooperation. The two leaders also exchanged views on the Ukraine conflict. Xi Jinping reiterated China's position, promising more constructive efforts in promoting a political settlement through dialogue and negotiation. The Chinese president also rejected the Cold War mentality and unilateral sanctions. Putin said that Russia appreciates China for consistently upholding an impartial, objective, and balanced position and standing for fairness and justice on major international issues. Putin said Russia has carefully studied China's position paper and is open to talks for peace. He said Russia welcomes China to play a constructive role in this regard. Also during Xi's visit, the two presidents are expected to draw up a new blueprint for a bilateral comprehensive strategic partnership of coordination.
And from that report coming from the Russian capital of Moscow, we now bring this news edition to an end. But for more details on this and other stories, as always, as ever, you can visit on our website on Eyeafrica.tv. But for now, many thanks for the privilege of your company. Thanks for watching. Stay safe and do have a pleasant evening. Bye for now.